All right, let's get started. Anything to discuss before we get started?
Anything to discuss, Alex? How's your mental state?
I'm in Texas, so it's good. I'm in Austin.
Whose house are you at?
Airbnb.
You do Airbnb still? I feel like that was a time and a place. I know you have ties. It's just very Web 2.0. The idea of staying in someone else's house is always weird.
Lots of people don't care.
Made Alex rich.
Yeah, it's a regulatory dodge, but that's fine. Welcome to People vs. Algorithms, show about detecting patterns in media technology culture, various other things. We have Lachlan Cartwright, who's going to be from Breaker, who's going to be joining us later. We're going to dig into the characters of the 60 Minutes drama because I think there's a lot of character development going on right now. And Lachlan is a great reporter. He's feral, as he would pronounce it. I pronounce it feral. He's been doing a great job in this story, and he's got a great tabloid sensibility. So I'm glad he'll be joining us. Let's start off with a couple of, first, an update. PvA Field Notes is open for beta testing. Is it alpha testing or beta testing, Troy?
You don't have to get Alex's take on that. I would say it's open for public viewing.
I think I would say it's early alpha.
Early
You call that alpha?
No, and that it worked. And it works pretty well.
Alex, well, we're going to do a live real-time design critique on it. Because yesterday, Brian accused me of making it look like it was designed by Claude. But Alex
Claude. I love when Troy lets his Canadian show. That's hilarious. Go on.
Alex, I changed the logo last night.
Because I taunted you.
Mostly in reaction to Brian accusing me of AI design.
It looked like AI design. You know this, Alex. I want to get your take on this, and then we'll get back to PvA Field Notes for a minute. But when I come across AI writing, it infuriates me to some degree. And look, I don't care like if you're writing some marketing email, but for me, I guess maybe as a writer or just someone with some kind of like, I guess what they call taste now or standards, it just drives me nuts. Like now I notice I'm coming across AI design. Everything looks like Claude or Claude. Do you see this as a designer? This must drive you nuts. Or a designer's just more relaxed in general.
Well, I mean that's the thing with these systems, right? They regurgitate what's been made before, and I think a lot of the stuff that you see, especially when you're in my world and you're kind of close to it, is a lot of templates have been built, or are sold online, like WordPress templates, all sorts of templates for your sites, and a lot of them have kind of that design aesthetic that came out, and they started kind of. Came out in the early 2020s, and it was starting to kind of take over the internet already. But now because Claude can regurgitate these things, the idea of good design is becoming kind of this homogeneous thing. We have, you were just talking about Airbnb before, the Airbnb-fication of homes, right? Where at some point, so many homes just started looking the same. Same shit's happening with websites.
This is not a new phenomenon.
It's not a new phenomenon, but it's accelerated. It's accelerated. I think it's accelerated because now everybody has access to it.
There was a whole GTC aesthetic, if you recall. There was a Web 2.0 aesthetic. There was the sort of, Twitter-influenced aesthetic and their design system. And it's great because it always gives enterprising people an opportunity to go against the grain and challenge the conventions.
Why don't you challenge the conventions with Field Notes then, Troy?
I did.
Okay.
Field Notes is human designed, AI assisted.
It uses yellow, for one.
That's the part that I don't like. And the italics. I noticed that italics are showing up now because Claude likes like italics.
A serif italic. Claude is like a serif italic. Yeah.
The things that are annoying is people had access to templates before. Now more people have access to design that doesn't look like crap, right? And we're going to talk about the new Claude LLM, the new model, Fable 5, is actually really good at design. So, one benefit is that the internet has better UX than it ever did, potentially. And it still allows enterprising people with design sensibility to try to stand out of the crowd, which was always the job, right? Like always the work. At first, it was hard to make a zine with a photocopier. Then everybody had a printer. Then you needed to...
This is what people miss, guys. There's still a lot of choice, even if the AI is helping you. Like, I wanted a readable body font, Alex, and I opted for Atkinson Hyperlegible Next. Now, there's a few sort of affectations in the face in terms of like how the E is styled and how the G is styled and stuff. And it could have just been full-on generic display copy, but I made a choice to use that typeface. I made a choice to use JetBrains Mono as an accentuating typeface.
Okay, so you're showing that there was some thought put into this. I appreciate that, man. Troy.
100%. Alex knows this.
But no, this is the thing. It's like effort.
Brian.
Effort means something. Like giving a shit. It shows that you give a shit.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it does. But also, I mean, you do have to stand out. But the thing that I think we should all be thankful for is that this saved hours of Troy just yelling at me to change the fonts.
That's true.
which is the way it would have would have usually happened. Make it italics. It was like, I don't like italics. I don't care.
Okay, so aesthetics aside, Troy, explain to the audience that is curious about why they would want to be involved in PvA field notes. Because I personally, I love the product, as you know.
Yeah, well, you were the genesis of it, actually. So.
It's my product. Yeah, let's be fair.
That's your part.
But
I'm just the
look,
coder
I
on the project.
appreciate production partners. I mean, you've been great to work with.
Okay, so what I learned this morning is it's hard to understand. And even though it seems simple to me and maybe to you, it's hard to understand that it's basically a feed-based blog with SMS. So instead of logging in and going and, setting the title and setting the body and all of that, essentially what you do is you text in a line and a link, and it absorbs any content type, an X post, an Instagram post, an image, a thought, whatever, and puts it into a nice feed. That feed is also got a kind of burgeoning comment system, which is where hopefully all the action is. It's not the item as much as it is the conversation that ensues. But at its most aspirational, it's a community, and it's people that, want to talk to us and to each other and like the show and want to see what goes into making it. The impetus behind the whole product, PVAnotes.com, was I had been playing a lot with, processing feeds from lots of media and making it a useful interface for myself. Brian said, I just want a place where I can dump my takes and links. And that became the feature that took over the product. And essentially, it's the externalization of our chat in WhatsApp. Now, we could have just created a great big WhatsApp group, and that would have been fine. There are significant limitations in what you can do with WhatsApp. We could have just created an app, which maybe we should, because the one thing about modern publishing is you no longer have any mechanism to get people to know that you've put something on a website. There's no Google, there's no social. You have to find a distribution mechanism. Essentially, the great thing about apps is they have built-in notification functionality. The problem with apps is you got to deal with Apple. You got to download the app, and there's a good chance that it just goes into the app cemetery place. I use 5 apps on my phone. I don't use a lot of apps for media companies, save streamers like Netflix and New York Times. I built it differently. I built it as SMS connected to the open web. And it's kind of cool. You can see what goes into the making of the podcast. That's what's cool about it.
I'm a huge fan of using SMS. I think it's like such a direct way of connecting with stuff.
Really nice, really intimate. But the problem with it, Alex, is it, as far as I can tell, and I probably need to do more research, it's controlled by one company. That company's Twilio. Essentially,
there's others. Wait. There's others.
Is there a Twilio, like a scaled alternative to Twilio?
I mean, scaled, no. But like Twilio, if you're just at the volume, I believe that this is like you can use some cheaper services. Twilio's expensive.
Well, what essentially Twilio does is it gets approvals from the telcos to allow you to use SMS because there's a whole bunch of anti-spam sort of consent requirements that you have to go through essentially a complex bureaucratic onboarding process to show that your consent process is legit. And that part takes a lot of time and it's hard. The other part about it that's a pain in the butt is it's really expensive. So if we had a community of 10,000 people and I sent out a daily digest every day and it was the sort of infrastructure for notifications around comments, the thing would cost, I don't know, $3,000 a month or something like that. It would cost real money, $5,000 a month. So it's expensive and notifications are free.
I think what I like about that, Twilio aside, what I like about the product and my sort of metaphor for it is the open kitchen. Like some people don't, like open kitchens were never a thing, you know? And like, I like the idea of, I hear from people about this podcast like all the time. And I believe that there are some people who would like an open kitchen experience. And an open kitchen experience, the best of them, you kind of, you talk to the people making the food and you see how the food's getting made. It's not just someone who just shows up at your table like with a dish that you never saw prepared. It has a bit of transparency to it. And it also, to me, I'm a big fan of old Twitter. Like they took it from, Elon took it from us. And by us, I mean the journalist types, the people who are information addicts, who are also happen to be quick-witted. That's journalists. That's why journalists love Twitter. Not because like it was the cool kids at the cafeteria table.
You forgot the woke part.
No, that was part of like what was used against like the old Twitter, I believe. In any case,
I love journalists. The great thing about them and the problem with them is they hate everything. They hate everything. There's nothing you love.
Except old Twitter and the old internet and blogging, how it used to be, and how magazines used to be.
Freedom and like well-designed media products. Yeah, like there's a lot of things that we do.
Free.
Like, but anyway, that I think it's a great product. People should check it out. PVAnotes.com. We're going to be letting in a select number of people, right, Troy? There's a bit of a, velvet rope
here's
situation.
one of the complexities of it. There's two tiers, essentially. There's members, and that's people we love, people that we let in, that want to come and comment and highlight stuff and be part of the community, but they cannot text directly into the feed. If they do text something to the feed, it goes to our tips file, which is basically like a queue. And then there's contributors. And contributors can text anything into the feed, which is obviously, a higher, order thing that we have to be comfortable with the person, unless someone doesn't send in some random shit into the feed. So that's the way it's structured today. We invite people to be contributors, and the most, insightful and interesting of those can be contributors, and they can dump stuff in.
Yeah.
I love it, Troy. I think that because I'm the person that gets easily confused, and it takes me a while to kind of get into things. I think we need to be careful, how we frame it, because it's got so many different things going on. It's got that social network feed, it's got the connection to the podcast, which I don't think is well represented yet. I think we can kind of connect the podcast into it more. And it's got this
weakness
idea.
of mine. I complicate things. You know that.
Well, it's not that. I mean, I think it's very good. I think it has all of the features that it needs. I'm just wondering if, the interface itself shouldn't just be a chat interface, as if you're looking into, it's very clear you're looking at an open WhatsApp channel, essentially, which is essentially what people are doing.
That would
right?
be, that would be, right? So you would basically use AI to manage a chat channel such that it was coherent for people.
Yeah, or you could make it work just the way it does now.
The AI is moderating and managing, and you add, one of the problems is in SMS, you have commands like alt status, whatever, feedback, dig deeper. And then you have just chat, and it can go horribly wrong really easily. The other issue with it is if it was just chat, Alex, it ought to just be on a chat platform. Because if it's just chat and we're using Twilio, it will become really cost prohibitive to just manage purely that way.
or you run it through WhatsApp. But now we're getting into a product discussion. Here's what we're saying, folks. You can make shit now. And for the next couple of weeks, even better, because Fable 5 is available.
Okay, we're going to get to Fable 5, but I think here's as the journalist here, I think I'm still a journalist. The downside of this.
Playing like one, for sure.
I know. So like I'm spiritually at least. This is just leading to more. AI has led to like a massive uptick in the amount of books, the amount of podcasts, the amount of videos, the amount of newsletters. I mean, never before have we had more stuff that's been created that is way ahead of consumption. I mean, we talk about the app graveyard. We're surrounded by graveyards of stuff that is just being created just because you can create it. And to me, the flaw of a lot of these AI tools, and you're seeing it within companies, it's just creating more useless work. I mean, people are smart. They're protecting themselves. They're just ping-ponging back and forth a lot of like AI work slop to each other, feeding it back into an engine, then ping-ponging it back to another person. And I think that's why the big question here is, in this world of abundance that's filled with books nobody reads, songs nobody hears, apps nobody downloads, and restaurants nobody eats from, when are we going to get better versus more? Because I think that, to me, is the question. We're producing so much more, and that is a form of abundance. But it's, to me, and I think this is where we see the backlash to it, particularly from those who are on the creator or creative side, is that a lot of this stuff isn't very good. It's a lot of sameness too. Alex, do you feel
there
this
you go, you go hate.
Troy, no. Troy's going to go into his sloppulous take. I want to have Alex first.
I have a really clear opinion about this stuff. First of all, this didn't just start happening with AI, right? If we look at, I have data for video games, but in the last, 5 years, the output of video games has doubled. So that means that happened before AI, like the acceleration happened before AI. It's not just in the last few years. And we saw the same thing with books. We saw the same thing with music. It's just the tools, more people had access to it. So when a technology like AI comes into that, it's like an accelerant. So I think the market is already primed, right? Because there are platforms where you can release your stuff for free, all of that stuff. So it's not, so I don't think it's going to slow down. But, people tell us like, hey, you're launching a game, you're competing against 15,000 other games, and it might be 100,000 one day, right? It might be 200,000, 1 million, but that should never be kind of your strategy. In essence, you're always competing against maybe 100 things or 50 things, right? Because you're producing something that is for a specific audience, and it is at a quality ratio that kind of puts you in a different bracket. And so the hope is that you can market yourself, then you can promote yourself in a way so that you are only competing with these smaller numbers. And that's the platforms. The platforms are adjusting to make you feel like there isn't 100 million, minutes of slop being pushed to YouTube every day. I mean, I turn on YouTube and I have specific creators and specific pieces of content pushed to me. Some of them I've used, some of them I've never seen, but I feel like I'm only seeing this good stuff, and actually there isn't an unlimited supply of it. You know what I mean? And I think that is the story of the internet, right? There's going to be a billion things there, but if the systems work out, if there's an ecosystem of search and paid promotion and all of these things that functions properly, you're actually only going to interact with one thing. So you never hear of the 10,000 romance novel books that come out every year. Troy does, but we hardly hear about them.
Well, I will say this, and I want to get your take on this, Troy, I'm
trying to be optimistic.
No, I appreciate the optimism. Attention is finite. It is the scarce asset, right? And I think the story of the long tail, what we're getting to now, is infinite long tail, right? And in infinite long tail, ultimately that attention is going to keep getting eaten away and eaten away and eaten away. And I think the reaction that we're seeing from who Troy is going to pigeonhole as the sort of cultural elites is in reaction to that, because ultimately it does have a downstream impact. UGC won. UGC overtook the head of the tail. The head of the tail barely exists anymore. It's just infinite long tail. Now, Troy, I want you to represent the capital class now as a sloppulist. This is a term I'm trying to make happen. Go on.
It's great coming in after the angry editor or writer, the journalist, and the sad designer.
Webinar host.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
for the optimism, Alex. I do agree with you that this is not a new phenomenon, but cheap content, democratized content, I would argue, created the open web and created lots of niche content production that has been incredibly valuable and surfaced all kinds of new talent. Cheap cameras made YouTube. YouTube wouldn't exist without, proliferation of cameras. And what has that resulted in is a new generation of filmmakers that are challenging, tired IP in Hollywood. And, there's 5 examples of that in the last 2 weeks. So, do the filters mature as content explodes? Of course they do. They already have. It's called an algorithm. That's what this show is largely about. And so I do think that this backlash, like there's a good story in our feed from this very thoughtful writer whose name escapes me, writing about, that if you have AI write something for you, he's going to come to your house and kill you. And
Sam Chris, by the way, that's Sam Chris. He talks about, he wrote about the shape-shifting AI demon that's turning up everywhere and, quote, replacing all meaningful language with reams and reams of genuinely
that's so sad. I'm going to come over to your house and
meaningless
kill you.
Meaningless drivel. He doesn't literally mean it, Troy.
It's credential protection, right? For people that either have the gift of writing or the designation of the guild. And listen, no one ever said, type in, write me a story about X in chat and expected that would be interesting and that you were going to develop any currency as a result of that. If you use AI as a tool, like someone does using desktop publishing or a coding platform or a camera on their phone, you're still in there making decisions all the time. And this should be a tool that helps you make a better product. If it doesn't, it should get filtered out and no one will spend any time on it. So, I'm not talking about content arbitrage where people use machines to pull attention from one place to another with no creative effort. I'm talking about creative tools that make people better. And I think that that we're going to be overwhelmed by slop is just a boring argument. It's a boring thing. It's no, new types of content, new formats will emerge, new filters will emerge to make sure you get your right stuff. And by the way, we're really well served. And if you're an interested person on the internet, slop aside, you can find content miracles everywhere. Great stuff. And then the ecosystem of Hollywood exists to surface that stuff and market that stuff and bring it to more people. And that's just abundance is an old problem. The long tail was a concept from 10 years ago.
But it's interesting that you talk, and I don't want to bring you in, Alex, but you talk democratization, which is that's a key, that's a tell. This is a cardinal part of the sloppulous. And sloppulous to me they're usually have 2 feet, not 1 foot in the capital class. And they're compressing the creative class and they're trying to ally themselves with populism, even though it's completely incompatible. But it's
ridiculous what you're saying. I'm not trying to compress anybody. What I really wish Alex was my bitch. I really do wish. I wanted to call him so many times when I couldn't make the right font decision, when I had a problem with the feature, right? Instead, he was a dick to me, but that doesn't matter because it's the point is that making a product, a good product, either with AI or without AI, takes soul and taste and judgment and instinct and, appetite for details and all the things. It still takes that work.
It can take that.
Yeah, it can.
Well, in my world, it takes that.
Look, hey, there's a challenge here. We're talking about apps and books and things like that. And there's going to be a lot of taste that needs to be applied to build something that resonates with people, I think. And the more abundance that, when the the Lumiere brothers did that tour in Paris, and at some point somebody showed a train, they were like 3 20-second footages, and that was incredible. And people went to watch them 100 times. And abundance in media has been growing ever since. I am much more worried about the fact that all of our consumption is being turned into a short video feed, right? That is, I think, more worrying, in part because slop is very easy to inject in that. But I think like when we're talking about taste, I think we're also like, I struggle with that because there's no way we don't use any AI for any art in the studio. No sound, no piece of concept art, nothing, right?
Except that guy making the backdrops in Serbia that's actually using it without you knowing.
Well, if I find out, he's out. Like that is a choice that we're making. We're not using it at all. Okay. And
that's
I
awesome.
think
That's a choice you make.
It's a choice I make because I think that part of the...
But wait, explain to me why you made that choice. Because I think the why is important.
Well, I think first of all, it's the most fun part of making shit. Like, why would we not do it? That's one. Two, the art of sitting down and creating something and slowing down to make something is actually, for me, just like, that's the creative process, and that's what you come up with.
You wouldn't hire someone to have sex for you, Alex.
Your best idea. Well, I sit in the corner of the room.
Ladies.
What your best ideas come
The recording
from that
is
process.
on, guys, just to let you know.
Yeah, your best ideas come from that process, and I find this. I am uncomfortable about this kind of like AI output. I don't like it, right? But hey, I have a complicated
writing,
view of it.
don't you, Alex? You use it for writing.
I use it to help
use
me
it for
edit
code?
my. I use it to help me edit my writing. I use it for code, like testing, trying to debug something. It's incredible.
Just for testing? You don't use it for writing code?
I think the writing code, you kind of, if it's like an internal tool, yes, for stuff that's going, straight into
the biggest externality
product.
of AI, dare I say it, is it's creating a generation of liars.
It's creating a
Everybody's
generation.
using it. People who just don't
Well,
know.
everybody's using it in some capacity. What I'm saying is you're not just like putting features into the engine, into the LLM, and it's spitting out like,
Well,
stuff that
that's
works,
the
right?
complicated thing. And I do think we are in some sort of weird in-between phase where using AI is, I think for a certain group of people, using AI is, they get the look that like when you walk by a dog taking a shit, because they have to like take a shit like in public, which is like humiliating, right? And they have this look on their face like, oh my God, why are you looking at me while I'm doing this? And I feel like that is how people feel like with AI, right? Like, it's like, oh God, I'm using AI, but like, I really hate the overall effect that AI is having with a lot of the sameness that's out there to me. And it's kind of embarrassing to be giving over your capacity to think and express your thoughts to a robot, I think, but so be it.
I agree with you. I think that the beauty's in the friction of the creative process. And that's something that you can that's where the magic is. And that's what ultimately people will pay more for, because there's human energy. But, you make what you want to make, and you use the tools that you're comfortable with. And market will decide whether it's valuable.
Yeah.
The
Ben,
market.
I know. Here's the thing that
love the
doesn't
market.
Here's the thing that doesn't work, Troy, with that argument. There needs to be a response against slop, yes, on Spotify. I think I don't use Spotify. I will not use apps that keep pushing me like AI generated crap, because that's not what I want to watch. And I think we do need to be aware of that, because it's great for the platform to have an unlimited amount of content created for very, very cheap. Like that's what they want. It's more surface areas for advertising. I was in an Uber, and I posted about that on Field Notes. I was in an Uber where somebody was playing, the music through YouTube, but it was also playing on their screen, oddly enough. And I heard an Adele song that I never heard before, and it was with John Legend. Turns out Adele never made a song with John Legend, but there's YouTube channels with hundreds of music videos of duets that never existed, and people listen to them. And so when we're talking about like the taste of the creator, we also need to talk about the taste of the audience. And I'm sorry if that sounds elitist, but taste is developed. Right, my taste was developed by hanging around people who focused me around certain things, including you, Troy. Like
Because
I
it
do worry
pulls
about
people,
that. I do worry about that.
It pulls people without natural taste into being more tasteful, right?
The Adele example is really excellent because it's really an extension of the remix, right? And remix culture, starting with dub, changed the way, created new categories of music. I don't really have an issue with that, particularly if the originators of that song are
But
getting
Troy, there was
paid.
a process. That was because the guy went to that old record shop and found that one album that had been pressed and sampled it, and then somebody said that it was there and heard it and added a beat to it. Like right now, it's like, hey, make me an Adele and John Legend song. There is no I think we're flying past the idea that like the output is all that matters. If the output is good, it's all that matters. The process matters as much as the output, I think. In culture, because the process generates all of these like little bits of things that we don't notice, that becomes a B-side. It becomes a melody that like you take when you leave the band and you like your solo career.
I don't know how we manage it practically. And listening, we've been exploiting feeble minds with content since, late night infomercials. In fact, I just got a call from my sister. My mother was subject to one, bought a watch and a $60 a month subscription plan or like trip insurance or something like that she'll never even ever activate. But at the same time, like the modern infomercials alive and well, I saw this 4-minute, I put it in field notes, 4-minute nuzzle AI generated story about an old woman who didn't want to go to her daughter's wedding in Italy because she was worried about the pain and suffering associated with traveling that far and, moving away from the house. And it was ultimately like, a kind of 4-minute drama about why the nuzzle pillow solved this woman's, conundrum. And this kind of shit, there's like $10,000 a day being spent on that particular ad on Facebook, and it's the modern infomercial, and old people are lapping them up on that sad social network. Do we go and arrest the, nasty, arbitrageurs and kind of direct sellers for harvesting the, a feeble mind to sell them a neck pillow? I don't think so. I think that goes on, and there's nothing really we can do about it, and it's kind of fine. It's fine. They need to buy something anyway. So they bought a nuzzle pillow instead of, a trip and fall watch.
One upside of all of this is, YouTube is not just the future of TV. It's become the future of all entertainment. And we're seeing this like with I don't want to call it a resurgence in movie theaters, but there are a lot of low budget.
It is.
Well, I want to see more evidence, right? But there is, Troy, give me what we're seeing right now with Backrooms, with Obsession, Iron Lung. Now we got Digital Circus is the latest to take its, basically we're seeing franchises that are YouTube centric, and they're translating that dominance into box office success.
Digital Circus because
did 35 million globally in 4 days.
Right.
Okay. So, go ahead.
What's interesting about it is it used to be, who did you know in Hollywood? Was your log line good enough? And, could your project get financed, and you'd do the dance forever? And if you were lucky and knew the right people, or was the son or daughter of someone famous, you got your film made. And now YouTube is a proving ground. Like, people have to really know how to make content and get audience. It's the talent farm. It's an IP engine, and it's like an audience development machine. And we're starting from a very different place. A young 20-year-old who has spent 4 years figuring out how to turn his beautiful vision into stories, and now has the opportunity to make a film. Chernin and A24 financed it. Backrooms is the biggest film that's ever come out of A24. It was made for $10 million and it did, $216 million globally. And I saw the movie with my daughter last night at a movie theater. And it's a remarkable, thoughtful, deep, like really, it's like actually hard work mentally to figure out actually what's going on. And it's a great piece of content. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't have to go watch some regurgitated IP bullshit. I can watch someone who makes interesting stories, who's found a way to get to Hollywood because of, his success on YouTube. And by the way,
Kane Parsons, by the way, who hates AI. Go on.
Who hates AI? But, the AI machine, the AI machinery enabled his success because it was the algorithm on YouTube that allowed him to become that person.
It's a
great.
general purpose technology.
Anyway, I'm all for that. There's like 5 of them, Alex. I don't know if you've seen any of them. My daughter told me Obsession is remarkable. I can't wait to see it. There's that other one, Iron Lung. I've not seen it. There's like good stuff finally.
Yeah.
These younger creators that have built an audience on YouTube, it's great. But, I think that they're also at risk of platforms abusing the fact that people can create slop and powerful algorithms and not because they have some sort of grand master plan, but if, posting 1 minute of video, generates 1% more, profit because, there's just more stuff on the platform and less people to pay, then and people accept it, then we are going to see more slop. So it is part of the people's jobs of creating content to respond to it and the audience to also kind of say no to it. And I think that's what we're seeing when people are going to the theater to watch a movie. People are making that choice.
I personally feel torn by this discussion a little bit. I play vinyl, guys. My son's a musician. I love all this stuff. Okay. You know that, Alex. And whenever I approach any of
Troy,
these
you don't want mass culture to be confined to becoming vinyl. I think we still need
I know, but
healthy,
I also love the tiramisu baby.
Popular culture. You do.
Who's AB's gorilla? Bondar?
He's amazing.
I love the tiramisu baby. Listen, what's so confusing about our time is when angry writers write long, thoughtful, funny, amusing pieces about coming to kill you at your home because because you used AI to write a piece. And then on the other side, there's this should we really be spending our time talking about AI creation, content arbitrage, all that junk? When last night, Dario drops a memo at Anthropic and, basically really spells out that unless we do something, things are going to, spiral away from us. And here's a person that sits on top of the most successful AI company in the world. And he sees all of the progress that's being made with the models. He sees all of the, challenge around bioweapons, around cybersecurity, around undermining democracy and all of these things. And we really, on one hand, it's such a weird time because you're this shit's real. And this is and on the other hand, there's well-meaning, I suppose, angry writers talking about stochastic parrots. And so it's a funny time. I think we need to kind of move away from, is this potentially going to poison our brains because there's, a tiramisu baby in my content feed? And can we now talk about the real issues?
I don't know. I mean, I don't totally agree. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time, et cetera. I have nothing to add to the bioweapons debate. I have no idea. But Alex, yes. Anthropic came out with a new, what do I know about bioweapons? Nothing. My position on the bioweapons is don't let AI build.
Don't do it. Yeah.
There. No idea how you do that.
We're podcasters and, I'm right now in Austin, the home of Joe Rogan, and I'm reminded that, podcasters should have an opinion about everything. But this is one of them where you're no, we don't want that. And there are a lot of technologies that we stopped or paused or put into some sort of constraints because we're regulated. That's right. Yeah. Because, gene splicing, right? I can't go out and make a clone of myself yet.
What happened to Dolly? Remember that was Dolly was
exactly.
The big moral panic.
Do that and make that motherfucker work for me.
The problem is then you'll have Sam Altman saying hey, if we stop this, then you won't be able to cheat at your college exam. And then everybody goes, oh yeah, you're right. So let's have bioweapons.
No. It's China's going to win. China's going to win.
Oh, China's going to win. That's the other one.
That's the big argument. So talk to me about this new model this is, I found it very interesting that they're now calling it a mythos class model, which is kind of like nuclear submarines. They're starting to move into the sort of nuclear submarine naming convention.
I actually like Claude's topic naming convention. So Mythos came out. It's, if people remember, but it's called Fable here. Mythos was the model that they announced that was so powerful that they couldn't release it to the public. Instead, they released it to, key corporations making browsers and operating systems. And a lot of people thought that that was kind of a marketing trick. Say, oh, it's too powerful, we can't give it to you. But turns out that the data came back, and a lot of these operating systems and places like the Firefox organization, some of them released some numbers and they were astounding, right? Like 4 or 5 times the amount of critical bug finds, bugs that were 20-year-olds, exploits were found. So yeah, Mythos is the real deal. They announced Fable 5. Fable is kind of like the gentrified Mythos. It's got severe,
like nanny Mythos.
Yeah. So if you do anything that looks like you're trying to build anything nefarious, it'll kick you down to a lower
So
model.
if I try to build a bioweapon with this, is it gonna like intercede?
It'll make you build a bioweapon with a shitty model. Like no work.
You're right. I am keeping you from building a bioweapon.
So here's the thing that's interesting. They're giving people 2 weeks of access. Part of their, most people either use these models for free or have a subscription, but people are really serious about it. And Troy knows that, start paying per token, right? And so what they're doing with this model is that they're giving it for 2 weeks for people who have subscriptions. But in 2 weeks, it'll go to per token price, which means a lot of the stuff that that I might be doing, I'm building a little dashboard. If I went to, I pay $200 a month, but if I went to token cost, every prompt I do could cost me between $10 and $60 easily, right? So that's going to be interesting. But I tried it, and I tried running it through a thing that I had built, and that took me a while to build, and that I was okay with. It's a dashboard. Like I feel like internal stuff, like data sciencey stuff, I use it. It's pretty good. It's a major leap, guys. It's scary. It's scary that it's got...
What's scary, Alex, is when it makes decisions on your behalf.
Right. It sees around corners, and it'll even tell itself like, oh, I don't like the way this button feels. I'm just going to move that around and change the language. It can generate in a single prompt. Somebody pretty much built a rough version of a clone of a 3D kind of land management game. And the prompt wasn't very long. It was a couple of paragraphs. And it managed a 3D engine. It created assets. It did all that stuff. And so the idea of being able to build like things that are pretty extension in a single prompt just shows the power of this thing. And so just like testing it, like running it on my dashboard that I built with the help of the previous model in like 15 minutes, it completely improved it. So once again, it's a leap, right? We keep thinking we're plateauing, but this is another leap. And that's why I think if you work at that company, you're probably a little bit scared of what's coming.
I don't know. I mean, you're stupendously rich, so you can just like build a bunker.
Who, me?
No, I mean, if you're working at those, I'm not saying if you're like you're working in Anthropic, I don't think you're cowering in the corner. You're not cowering in the corner like scared, like you're actually
well, Peter Thiel moved to Argentina, so
office.
like maybe that's
I mean, I want just a quick observation on it, Brian, is that you see people like you complain that Riverside moved their interface buttons. And, we've been part of product backlash before when, people when a product manager took away a feature or changed the interface on Excel or whatever. But what's happening here is people freaking out because Mythos, Fable is directing people to the crappy model in ways that is disappointing people, or saying like, listen, there's nothing nefarious about the prompt that I just made. We're really seeing these companies become so powerful and so important to the way we work and the way we think, that two companies that can make a policy change that literally change, what people expect from this kind of rented, genius that has become fundamental to their business is really staggering. And then obviously on top of that it becomes, important to how we think about national security, future of democracy, all the shit you don't want to talk about. But like, it really, these companies are insanely powerful, and we're just at the beginning of it. And I just think that that's something to reflect on.
Agreed. And OpenAI this week is joining the $1 trillion IPO parade. They did a confidential filing. Unclear when this is going to happen, but it's going to join SpaceX and Anthropic. with these massive IPOs, probably this summer, I would guess, if not soon afterwards, for all of them. And that's going to be a big test, right? I mean, you're going to have to file the S1s, and we're going to have to see how good these businesses truly are. And it's interesting to me with Mythos, I'm going with Mythos, is how the pricing is going to be done. Because I feel like the typical Silicon Valley approach, like Uber, right, is they subsidize these services until they monopolize markets. And then next thing you know, you're paying through the nose. Not that Airbnb would have done anything like that with the cleaning fees and all that stuff. But I wonder whether we're moving towards like luxury AI, because to make these numbers work, and if these things are so powerful, and this was mentioned in the Pope's encyclical, is won't this just lead to like a big divide between those that can, you're going to end up paying for the really expensive model and it'll become like a luxury good.
I think that's true, Brian, but I would also say that the other thing that could completely undermine the vitality of these IPOs is a token price war. And I think that 90% of what we do can be served with open source models and with the cheaper, crappier models. And as soon as someone that has, additional revenue streams and a robust business like Google, does the first great, token sale and could completely undermine OpenAI's business and Anthropic's business because it becomes a price war. And I think that's something that we're going to have to see. What I'm concerned about is SpaceX goes public, day after tomorrow, whether, and then, 2 other $1 trillion IPOs. And if these go badly, I am really concerned that they create a really significant economic overhang, because we just enter a period of malaise when we realize that maybe, it's not going to prop up the economy like we thought it was.
Well, this has always been the sort of hostage situation. We either get massive job displacement or we get a financial crash, because the entire model is based on.
Yeah, I mean, it feels, not to be the kind of socialist populist here, but it does really feel like
the shoe fits, Alex.
Well, I mean, it does really feel like a kind of massive wealth transfer, the diffusion of that risk that they put us into and put onto us without our choice, right? Like like everybody has got like the 401k now needs to look at like how exposed they are to these IPOs that are just going to slip into them without the valuations are so crazy high. It doesn't even need a crash. It doesn't even need a crash. Even is it going to grow to 3 trillion? I don't think so. Maybe not for the next decade, if at all. And so people are just going to be caught like putting money into something that ends up, in one of early investors' pockets, and at best not make anything on top of it, and at worst there's a crash. Like, it feels like once again this is like put upon everyone, and nobody has a choice.
Yeah. In my neighborhood, I came across, I put this in field notes, some like wild postings of a wanted poster of Elon Musk for robbing your retirement. So this is in the ether, and it's going to be, it is going to be getting mixed up with inequality. We have 5 minutes before Lachlan comes on.
I have a hard stop now, so
you have a hard stop now. So Troy, let's do 5 minutes on the GLP-1 economy, because I think in many ways the AI story is crowding out the GLP-1 story, and GLP-1s are having a massive impact on the economy. Every week seems like it comes out with a new research about what it impacts. Right now, it's now linked to lower breast cancer rates. But 1 in 8 Americans are now on GLP-1s, and 44% of users end up drinking less. GLP-1 households spend 5% less on food, which doesn't sound like that much. Extrapolate that across the economy, it's massive. And this to me would threaten all kinds of these impulse businesses that prey on people's weaknesses for snacks, for tobacco, for Zins, I'm told, for booze. We got a note actually about the segment I did with AB last week about people getting into casinos, that casinos are probably at risk because it's another impulse. It's another thing that's like unrestrained impulses. And I think one of the things, it's too bad Alex had to drop off, is a lot of industries rely on whales. You know, video gaming is one of them. 5% of gamers are 65% of revenue. 10% of drinkers are 60% of sales. You see this in gambling and all kinds of areas. And that's why I think these are mostly extractive industries. What's an economy like without impulse?
Well, here we go again, is what I would say. Here we go again with the sort of angry journalist. You know, literally, we found a miracle drug, right? That we found a drug that can positively impact inflammation throughout your body, which can really assist with anything from cravings to brain inflammation to joint problems, and of course to weight loss, which is, you know, obviously connected to a lot of health issues. We should be celebrating this. And I don't really give a fuck if the economy reorders, because we have fewer people that are driven by mindless impulses to gamble or do whatever. You know, as I said before, the market will find a way to kind of figure out how to get people into the next thing. And, you know, I really don't, I mean, having done the drug, I really don't think it's going to turn off your kind of economic motivations.
Hey, Lachlan's here. Lachlan, we're just finishing up on GLP-1s.
Oh, no worries. Sorry. Do you want me to hop off?
No.
No. Stay on. Tell us about your GLP-1 usage and your experience with it, Lachlan.
I put it into my eye, and I've noticed that the size of my left foot has gone down. So it's working brilliantly for me.
That's great. So it also.
See, this is what I said. Journalists are always quick on their feet. You know, he just drops in and like he has an answer ready to go.
Yeah.
You never know where I'm going to pop up.
Yeah, that's your motto.
Troy, do you have more on this, or should we just go right into the 60? The
I think we've covered it.
All right, Lachlan Cartwright is here for our little PvA OT. We're going to go deep on 60 Minutes. But for those of you who do not know, Lachlan is the proprietor of Breaker, one of my favorite newsletters out there. There's a lot of media newsletters. I'm shocked by the number for a dying industry, but there are a lot out there, right? Why are there so many?
It's the world's greatest navel-gazing industry. You know, like we love reading about each other. So there is a plethora of these newsletters, and I'm lucky that Breaker has, you know, taken a small piece of the action, and we're just humbly and organically building it.
Yeah, what I like about Breaker is it's feral. Like, you know, you have a tabloid sensibility. You've worked at tabloids. You have it.
I grew up in tabloids across the pond.
You have it in your blood, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I grew up, you know, working at the Sun in London, learning from some of these legends of Fleet Street who would take me down the pub with the coppers and the crims that they were sourcing and allow me to sort of, you know, sit there as I sort of learned from osmosis.
I mean, beyond the work you have to do to get there, what I love about these feral types, Brian, is the great thing about a good tabloid journalist is like they understand what people are really interested in, and
that's a compliment, Lachlan. I think.
No, it's a great compliment.
The other big hit that I had, Troy, was I broke the yarn a few years ago about James Murdoch and his thoughts and his wife's thoughts about the family's coverage, or News Corp and Fox's coverage of the bushfires in Australia. And that story led to him leaving the board of News Corp. It led to this huge rift with his brother Lachlan and sort of him being in exile from the family. So the super injunction thing was really important. And, you know, my Murdoch coverage has then continued on to then staking out Uncle Rip's 95th and being the only reporter outside the grill, standing there for 8-9 hours in the cold to get the great and the good coming in for that occasion.
They must love you. They must love you, that family.
Yeah.
I think they have very wide views. Every time they have a crack, they say, "You guys taught me everything I know," which isn't very much, but still, I did learn every trick of the tabloid trade
100%.
from you guys. So you can't.
Leaves me wondering, Lachlan. Sorry to hijack this interview, but I have many questions. What did you learn from Pecker, from David Pecker? Did you learn anything from that guy?
I didn't learn much besides having a great footrest, which is the safe of sequences sat in my office with these catch and kill contracts, and I used as a footrest. And as I detailed to the New York Times magazine, at one point when I was helping to get these stories out in the bloodstream as a source, I had to open this rickety old safe to get one of the contracts out, to get the names to a journo. And I couldn't get the bloody door of the safe closed. And I was shitting myself that Dylan Howard would come into my office and see the safe open and question me as what I was doing. So I turned the TV up loud in my office, and I was just trying to just slam this bloody safe shut as I'm sweating.
That's so funny.
And
I mean, surely he taught you more than that.
I got it shot in time, but I learned absolutely nothing from David Becker. I got to say that period of my career, as I detailed to the New York Times magazine, the only high point was doing those series of the super injunction stories that I just mentioned. But I think what I learned from Becker was how not to be a crook.
Let me hijack back. Let's talk about the 60 Minutes drama, because look, you're in the thick of it. Dylan Byers at Puck is in the thick of it. It's competitive out there. Like, the rap is coming in. I know you've got a great feud with Sharon Waxman, Sharon Whackjob, as you call her. But this is like Oliver Darcy at Status is in this. The New York Times is in on it. Even the FT. Even the FT is deigning.
Reuters had a great hit. Ed Lee.
Ed Lee. Ed Lee's back.
Ed Lee's back. 3 bylines on a Reuters story, but they had a great hit about Bilton 2.0, a 24-year-old kid Bilton's hired and this woman who's shadowing him. No, look, the cavalry is here. Like, make no mistake. This is Christmas in June for media reporters. There is so much going on here. There are so many great characters from Barry Weiss, obviously, to Nick Bilton, to Scott Pelley.
So walk us through the characters.
All of this.
We believe in narrative here at PvA. So walk us through the characters, and let's start with Barry Weiss. Barry Weiss, she's a great character. I just think she is a wonderful character, but break down that character for us and what your reporting has told us maybe about her that isn't obvious to others.
Yeah, I mean, look, you had her backstory of leaving the New York Times in a bowl of flames, writing this memo, and then starting her Substack, the Free Press, which really just kind of took off in the moment we were living in, because her sort of stance was this anti-woke material that she drummed up. I remember actually going for a meeting at the Free Press, one period where I was briefly freelancing, and them offering me $2 a word. And I said, well, what do you want me to write? And the editor there said, well, just come up with 5 media companies and find us anti-woke threads to pull on, like what had happened at CBS with Tony DeCopo. And I said, sorry, you want me to do what? And they said, yeah, just pick 5 media companies. We just want anti-woke porn, basically. And I said, I don't think this assignment's for me. And I had to turn them down, even though $2 a word.
$2 a word?
Very generous. No one else was offering me $2 a word. At that time, I was writing for CJR and the Anchor of Vanity Fair. No one else was offering me $2 a word.
I don't know the CJR contracts, but I don't think it's $2.
They were about 25.
What underneath of all that, Lachlan, makes her a compelling character?
But she built this business, and got to give her credit. She built the Free Press through, her Israeli stance. She's obviously very pro-Israeli, this anti-woke porn. And she got the attention of some very, influential billionaires. She was out living in LA, people like Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, and she got a lot of investment, and she built the Free Press into, a 60-odd operation, and then, went out to flog it off to market. They bring in a bloke called Dennis Berman, who was a former Wall Street Journal bloke who was working at one of the bankers, I think it was Lazard. And in any event, they shop it around, and David Ellison picks it up for 150 mil. Now, why does David Ellison pick it up for 150 mil? Well, it's complicated because he, at that point, is trying to get a couple of deals through, one being the CBS, the Paramount deal, and then on to where we are now with Warner Brothers Discovery. And he obviously wants to win over Trump. He, makes it very clear that they're going to reorientate CBS. And what better way than bringing in the anti-woke crusader, Barry Weiss, and naming her editor-in-chief of CBS News.
What I find interesting about the Barry Weiss character is she's very charismatic. I don't know her. Everyone has told me she's very charismatic, particularly with Troy and his friends. With the boss class, you're outnumbered here, Troy. Sorry, you're just gonna have to deal with it.
Well, I mean,
but she's not popular. It seems like she is a lightning rod within the guild, and that is the journalist types. Like, I was struck that Scott Pelley was saying, like, we need editorial independence from the editor in chief.
Well, you've got to remember, she doesn't have any TV experience. So her going into the Tiffany Network, this sort of legacy news organization, capital J journalist, big J with a bold J, and of course that is going to send them all scurrying away. And immediately she starts bringing in people also without TV experience. Her deputy Adam, formerly from the New York Times and the Free Press, Charles Farrell, who left the Journal under a cloud over his extremely close working relationship with a colleague, Maria Boudet.
Extremely close working relationship. That's doing a lot of work. Go on.
I've got to be careful with
You're really going to sit on that she's not a TV person thing? I think that's so lame. That's so lame. History is filled with, enterprising characters that had put a dent in the world because they were not the X of a category, but they came in and they looked at it different. And if there was ever a time to reshape a category, it's now.
Yeah.
Because the format, the product is designed for a medium that doesn't fit anymore. So the entire vocabulary
let's talk about how she's being reshaped
on the archetype.
This is like Crossfire.
Scott Pelley. Let's do the Scott Pelley, the whining, like obnoxiously entitled journalist profile.
He's an imperfect protagonist.
He's an imperfect show that's working. That was the one show that was working. Up 9% in the ratings. It is a cash cow. It's had its best season. That is the one thing that was working. And that's the one thing that she was told by George Cheeks, don't blow up. And she's gone on to blow it up. The morning show is number 3. The evening news number 3. And that both
the morning show doesn't have a brand, brother. If you're going to take anything and bring it into the future, you want an intersection of entertainment and news, and that's exactly what 60 Minutes is. And it has a brand, so you can add a personality layer onto it, and a clip layer, and a podcast layer, and a community layer, and all of that, and bring that thing into the future. That's where you would focus if it was your business.
Don't back down, Lachlan.
That's where you would put your energy.
This narrative that 60 Minutes has lived in the past for decades is something that Nick Bilton said when he got in there. It's just not the case. They have a big presence on YouTube. They've been doing a lot of the things you just mentioned, but this was the one show that was working
on
for them.
YouTube, man.
I think what Troy is getting at, let me translate here, is the product that CBS has been producing is simply out of date. Like, yes, 10 million people still watch 60 Minutes. Average age is 65, etc. The people making it,
and they're dumped in by football. It's important to recognize that.
The fact that we were like waiting on tenterhooks for the decision of Leslie Stahl, 84-year-old Leslie Stahl. I mean, look, no offense to Leslie Stahl, she's had a wonderful career and everything like this. We should not be betting the future of a franchise on an 84-year-old person. Talk to me about Scott Pelley as a character, because I dug up this. I was just like going through, I was looking for the X discourse, and I came across one of my old Twitter like posts from 2007, right? This is pre-Obama.
You were even angrier.
Yeah. And it was all lowercase before it went out of vogue. And it just said Scott Pelley is insufferable. There was no context whatsoever. And I think that actually holds.
Did it get any likes, Brian, at the time?
No, it got nothing because nobody was using Twitter. It was like Field Notes is now. It was like a private little enterprise. But talk to me about this as a character, Scott.
Yeah, Scott Pelley has a rep, and that rep is for, as you mentioned, somewhat insufferable. He also has a rep for doing things like this. This isn't the first time that he's gone off. I mean, it's happened back when David Rhodes was running the network, and there were some pretty intense contract negotiations going on. He'd hired Ari Emanuel over at WME. They were trying to shake CBS down for more money, and David Rhodes called Pelley's bluff and punted him to 60 and brought in another anchor. So, Scott Pelley went into that meeting with Nick Belton, I bet you, thinking I'm going to go down in a blaze of glory, even though he says differently. And, he has this reputation for being this sort of lively character.
Which I like. I have to admit, I have sympathy for this.
That's what TV and media is made up of.
Yeah.
It's made up of characters, and we need more of them, not less.
I know, Troy,
can't
you
be
have a different
insubordinate,
point of
man.
view.
You can't
Oh,
be insubordinate.
Come on.
Here comes
No,
the
no, no.
suit. Here comes the suit.
Come on.
I don't care if you're a member of the guild or star talent. Brian, you know this more than anyone. When you undermine the boss, you get shown the door. And that's how organizations work. And and you know what? It's a decision that they are perfectly entitled to make. It's their money. It's their show. It's their responsibility and accountability if it goes the wrong way. If they don't like the guy, fire him. It's not his show. He's hired talent. He makes $10 million a year. Womp womp.
Well, apparently they
You're
know
gone.
that his spouse.
You can't call the new boss an asshole in a meeting.
He
and
didn't
expect
call him
not
an
to get
asshole.
fired.
He did insult the bagels, though, which I thought was over the line.
That show is rich for having those kind of debates, and I think that the firing of him,
Dude.
that's somewhat of a
Troy, have you ever worked? Come on, you know this. Have you worked in a kitchen? I mean, kitchens are different. The rule, like kitchens, locker rooms, and like newsrooms, they're different workplaces.
correct, 100%, 100%.
The boss made a decision.
All right, let's talk about the new boss and Nick Bilton as a character. I knew Nick Bilton a little bit during the Web 2.0 days when he was helming. Do you remember the Bits blog on the New York Times?
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah, I knew him like that, and then he sort of disappeared from my like worldview, and then he went to Hollywood, and he's been
Well,
like
he went
working
to
with The
he went to
Rock.
Vanity Fair in between that period.
Yeah, but
He built
that was like
it
a
up.
sinecure. I mean, come on.
I've seen these type of journos before, and Nick Bilton fills a certain mold, and those are people that are always looking to monetize the story. They're not really interested in the actual journalism, but they're thinking this could be a book, this could be a screenplay, this could be a movie. Hence why Nick Bilton had, as I highlighted, 8 agents. He had eight agents on the cards, but he had effectively left journalism to pursue screenwriting. He was working on a project with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He meets Barry in one of these LA dinner parties with Nellie Bowles and gets on her radar, during that period. And then, as she's looking for a new P for 60 Minutes, Nick Bilton appears on the scene and is now collecting, a cool just over $2 million for this gig. But, again, another person without any TV experience, another person who's very much over there.
Wait. Hold on, man.
I don't
Hold
think
on.
Nick Bilton appreciated what was going to kick off when he took
Jesus Christ. So an enterprising journalist and a great storyteller, a person with a great sense of culture, goes out and figures out how to secure the bag. And you two angry journalists.
No,
think he's a
don't
traitor.
loot me. No.
You
Troy,
think he's a fucking traitor.
Troy, that is offensive, as you know. And
didn't say
as
Troy.
Lachlan celebrates, I believe in monetization. Okay, so like that's number one.
Yeah, aren't you meant to be hosting a lounge right now, Brian, or doing a new survey for a meter or something? Is that what should be happening right now?
I call it Vendorcella. Yeah, Vendorcella's happening. No, Nick, like, look, he got the extra pay. He's making what, $1 million a year more?
I think it's 2.3 million.
But it's $1 million
him.
more because he's got to take combat pay. This is not forever. This is a job where you negotiate the exit package before you take the job.
100%. 100%. And right now
It's called a contract, yeah.
And right now he has an enviable task where he has to now go out and try and recruit people for this show. My understanding there's a number of talent meetings that are in the books for next week. They're down, 4 correspondents. He needs
You take the job. You'd take it, wouldn't you, Lachlan?
I think it's a great idea. It's a great idea.
You would take a segment. We'd give you a segment.
I did a year of regional TV 20 years ago. I can't run a show. No, I wouldn't take the 60 minutes.
No,
job.
you could
do
be
it.
this sort of angry, modern Andy Rooney. Perfect.
No, that's my
It'll
job.
work. Well, that's Brian's job.
Apparently with Scott Galloway, and now they're in some pissing contest with Scott Galloway in the New York Post. What are you doing? Why are you fighting, Scott Galloway? The building's on fire. You need to fix this fucking 5-alarm fire. Why are you getting into a pissing contest with Scott Galloway? It's mad.
So Troy, what characters do you bring in then to 60 Minutes? If you're going to modernize it, just give me a couple, like my ideas, someone like Kyla Scanlon, bring in a new crop of correspondent.
That's a good call.
that isn't necessarily from the TV world, but should be YouTube native. And like they can maintain their independence. They've got heat. They have earned energy, as we've talked about on this podcast.
Yeah.
But give me the kinds of things that you think that they should do to modernize this.
I like watching 60 Minutes on occasion because it's like eating baby food, right? You don't have to chew the apple. And it is, Scott Pelley will sit there and ask them, we can't make news like this anymore for a young generation because it's too stupid. And that doesn't mean that someone an enterprising producer behind the scenes hasn't done a lot of digging and they found, an interesting story, but it's like the way it's delivered is designed for someone that grew up on, baby news, network television, CNN, which for a new generation is completely unwatchable. So you have to be more fiery. You have to, ask tougher questions. You have to be more conceptual. You have to have a fan base that extends beyond the show. And I think you have to, above all else, have a really good eye for, the characters in the story. But like the way that these questions are asked on 60 Minutes and the stories are presented is completely outdated. So you need to find modern talent. And the good news is, just like the renaissance we're seeing in filmmaking, is there's so many good people that are rising up through the podcast system.
Yeah, and they're not Anderson Cooper. Like, they're a Kyla Scanlon.
Get more guests to do a science segment.
Well, I don't know about that.
Why not?
I mean, I'm not a Dwarkish fan. What about Pablo Torre? I guess they kept that Worthon guy, but get Pablo Torre in there. I like the way he tells
seems
stories.
a little busy right now. He's got a couple of commitments already. No, but here's the deal. That audience that 60 has is still a very locked-in audience. They're going to alienate that audience. I bet you now a steak dinner that when that show comes back in September, there's already brand damage done. It's already going to dent that audience. And Troy, where is this new audience that you're talking about? They're out on YouTube. They're not watching 60 Minutes.
I mean, I think you have to execute like an omni-channel strategy for sure. But you have like the world's greatest kind of news magazine brand. There's no reason that with the right, execution in talent, storytelling, and distribution, you can't build an enormous business, much bigger than the business today. And yeah, you can keep harvesting the TV segment, make the product work for that, older consumer. That's fine. But I think that you can be a lot more sort of intellectually ambitious than you are today.
Okay. Let's put a pin in that now, because Lachlan, I want you to stay for good product. Okay. So I want to give it to you, Troy, but I have a good product. I'm just taking over good product a little bit, but it's because Lachlan is here. Because one of the you do many things well, Lachlan, but I think one of the things you do exceptionally well is party reporting, particularly when you zero in on the canapes, because that is the important.
The details matter. It doesn't matter if it's the food or it's little details. It shows the punters. It shows the readers.
Yeah.
On the reporting, you've done the reporting, and that's important.
So I
want to go through a list of what the all-time greats are.
Let me just go. I thought of you last night because I went to an
It's in the blanket at the end.
I went to an airmail party. It was not.
I need to speak to my mate John Kelly over at South Tribeca over Air Puck. I broke the Air Puck story, and they don't invite me to their shindig. How was it?
They're scared of you, man. They're scared of you.
Oh, give me a break. I'm not that scary. I'm a bloke with a fucking fedora.
So John told me, because I did my reporting, that this is a Puck staple. They like to serve pigs in a blanket, but it's Puck. It's airmail. So they're elevated pigs in a blanket. They've got this. They've got these black sesame seeds on top of this flaky puff pastry that encases a slightly spicy wiener. No spicy mustard, which to me is not, that's not the classic pig in a blanket. I know every culture has a version of a pig in the blanket.
We have mini sausage rolls in Oz.
Okay, you have mini sausage rolls, because the pig in the blanket is, and I wrote about this a little bit today, it is the quintessential totem of American abundance post-World War II, because People moved into the suburbs. They got a big house with a big lawn, and they invited people over to show off their big house with their big lawn. And this was a effortless, classy, easy way to serve cocktail party food to your neighbors. And
We served them at the Breaker 1 year bash. We served them there.
I say, there you go.
Without the poppy seed, and it wasn't elevated. It was just fucking pigs in the blanket.
Yeah, well, you have cigarettes. Go ahead.
I have to chime in now. Well, because I'm curious about the sort of ontology of cocktail snacks. I think that that's a really good choice because I really like them. I think the mustard's really an important detail if you want to talk details. But like if I was to go to my all-time greats, there's a bunch that you'll recognize, and I'm not going to put arancini on there but like a lamb lollipop, that's a nice item, and that's a premium item.
That's elevated.
You know, the very common tuna tartare on a chip with a little bit of a chive on top. No, you can't go wrong with that, right? I do think that the mini samosas, the little cocktail samosas, is the sort of Indian equivalent of pigs in a blanket, and I like
good
them
form
a lot.
factor. It's a great form factor.
And then I think one of the all-time greats is bacon wrapped dates. Those are amazing. I really like that as an item. I would stop at like chicken liver mousse on toast. I think not enough people like that kind of stuff. And sometimes if you have someone who's got a big budget, mini lobster rolls are nice.
I was going to say mini lobster rolls.
Well, that's
mini
like
meat
sliders.
pies for me. Mini meat pies. I love mini meat pies.
Yeah. That's a nice item. But like endive boats with blue cheese and walnuts, no. I don't think that's that good.
It's not hard enough. And also, I think people used to do this more like shrimp cocktail because you're going to drip it on yourself. You're going to get your.
Well, you're also you have a very high probability of getting food poisoning.
Oh yeah, we did. So Lachlan, we poisoned a bunch of people 2 years ago at a holiday, a PvA holiday party.
Nice party, yeah. The oysters were off. You can blame Joe Marchese.
I just went to your party that you made me wait outside for half an hour. That's the only party I've come to a few places.
Yeah, well, and we didn't have food. We did have food, but it was like meats and cheeses abandoned in a corner. It wasn't executed great. I have to admit,
really bad.
What was the ML bash last night? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, it was for the launch of Airmail's new like style section.
That's what we need. We need another style section.
Yeah, no, and it was, what is it called? I should know this.
Was it Lauren's party?
No, dress code, which is, they lured over Ricky DeSole to...
Oh, Ricky DeSole, not to be confused with Rufus DeSole.
To launch. It was well done, though. I will say, I wasn't actually invited. I tagged along. My wife got the invite, so...
They do spend money. I went to a couple of their White House correspondence parties, and they took over the Ned, and they had a huge seafood platter. Like, it's a huge thing of oysters and shrimp, and they had the whole takeover of the Ned, which must have cost an absolute monster, like probably 7 figures. So I tried to do some reporting on that. Liz Goff would not tell me how much those roofing blokes, they just love spunking money when they're not spending on their roofs. They're spending on little big parties.
75 people. I would say probably they paid 15, maybe 20.
Where was it?
It
South
was
Tribeca?
No, it was in Nolita. Temple Bar.
Oh, I like Temple Bar.
Yeah, it was a fine place. Should we leave it there?
I'll just round out the segment because you hijacked it. You know, last week
you told me you wanted me more involved. So this is what it looks like.
Yeah, that's me telling you something I didn't want to really tell you. The Tabasco, someone sent me some Stuzzi Italian hot sauce. I don't know who it was.
No, that's stuff. No.
It's not bad, actually.
Sauce. I've got a little bottle here on my desk.
Yeah, I love it. I love Tabasco the
Mini
most.
bottle of hot sauce.
You guys, I mean, after last night's incredible basketball game, it's impossible to not have live sports as a good product, especially playoff NBA. I mean, oh my God, this is one for the ages. I mean, incredible. I could hear people down the block screaming. It was like, with all the bad shit in the world, finally people have one positive thing in New York City to hold on to.
The city is electric. New York City is electric right now. Between this and the World Cup, the city is absolutely litty, and Saturday night is going to go off.
It is. And it's just one of those moments, Lachlan, where you really appreciate live sports. It's so terrific. It's great. I love it so much. And I also love that kids are going to the cinemas and watching real movies.
Yeah, I triggered New Yorkers. I decided to do a little experiment on
You were
X.
trolling yesterday, right?
I was. I decided to do a little experiment on
troll
X.
under the bridge.
And I just put that like New York is a terrible sports town because there's too much money, too many transplants, and there's too much going on. And it worked. It had like 500,000 like views. I wanted to see if like this like real antagonism.
Well, it's a kind of a bad take. Like, what are you doing?
No, I think it's defensible. It's defensible take.
First of all, the timing's bad. And second of all,
No, the timing's great.
The Knicks are the bad news bears, man, playing a team that had all the draft picks and all the money. So like, you know, one of the reasons that people are so into this is because there's not a top 20 star on the team. All they got is a sweaty 6'2" guy that's fighting for every basket he gets.
Yeah,
this is why people love the Knicks right now.
They got Nova guys. I'll give you that. Like, okay. Here's my thing on just very quickly on why New York is a bad sports town. I know this will trigger a lot of people. In America, American football is the number 1, 2, 3 sport. Okay. You cannot be a great sports town without having maniacal, fanatical attachment to your football team. And those towns are post-industrial wastelands for the most part. That's what you want in a great sports town. You want to be Pittsburgh. You want to be Cleveland. You want to be Buffalo. Yes. And yes, I admit you want to be Philadelphia. You have to have that because there's just too much going on in New York. New York is the center of everything. It's fine, but it's not going to be a great sports town. The Knicks, okay, admittedly, of the New York sports teams, I think the Knicks have the most organic appeal. But then you look at this stadium, $4,000 for a ticket, the Kardashians and all this celebrity stuff. This is just another thing for rich people.
It's like your take that downtown isn't cool anymore. I'm sorry, Troy, get into him.
Downtown's not cool, other than Fi-Dye. Fi-Dye's cool.
Downtown's still very much cool, mate.
All right.
It's cool.
Lachlan, this was a lot of fun.
I'm really glad you came on. You're amazing. Thank you.
Thanks,
All right. Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of People vs. Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People vs. Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.